So now it's a pleasure for me to introduce Jane Beaumont. So Jane has been a librarian for life and has been involved with library services for persons with print disabilities since she worked for and then volunteered with CNIB Library more than 20 years ago. Since 2005, she has supported a book club in Ottawa for members of the Canadian Council for the Blind. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jane and invite her to speak.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I haven't done this sort of thing for a long time, so please excuse me if I fumble a little, but we won't. Rachel and I have practiced a little. I should also say I was very much involved, deeply involved in the transition from the CNIB Library to Sila. And I like to say that Sila actually is beyond my wildest dreams. When I was first on the CNIB Library Board and the CNIB Library was struggling to provide service as a charity, we began to understand the kind of change that needed to happen, and it did happen, and Sila is a wonderful result. And it happened because of the support of the large public libraries and the provincial libraries, and that continues today. So from where I started in this to where we are now is amazing and wonderful to me. The other part of getting involved in book clubs was, as CNIB Library was transitioning to a digital library and CDs instead of the old analog tapes, we had to get new equipment into the hands of 20,000 people, and not a lot of them could afford to get that new machine. So in Ottawa, we went to the Ottawa Community Foundation looking for some funds in 2005, and at that first meeting, someone says, well, why don't you start a book club? Which was much better than just handing machines to people and never seeing them again. And so that's how the book club came about. And in Ottawa, through the CCB, the Canadian Council for the Blind, we have two clubs now, and I will use some of that. We'll use a lot of that experience as we're talking. So when we first started to talk about doing this webinar, the other issue was that this is not just about book clubs for blind people. This is about making any book club accessible for people with disabilities, in particular people with print disabilities, but just making sure that, I like to call it universal design, and making sure there are no barriers, because I know there are many, many public libraries across the country that do host book clubs, but I've never had any success in the few places I've tried in getting those book clubs to understand that it would be quite possible to be much more open and to make it much more accessible. And so I kind of hope we're going to start a movement of accessibility in book clubs, especially ones sponsored by public libraries. Public Library was very involved in the Ottawa ones early on because that was the way we got the books. That's changed quite a lot because people now typically obtain the books that are chosen themselves, but we'll come back to that. So we're talking about making book clubs accessible to people with a print disability, either sight loss or a perceptual disability like dyslexia, or even a physical disability, a disability and inability to hold the book. But I don't want to forget, we tend to be very focused on that in the CNIB Sila community, but I don't want to forget the people with a physical disability such as a wheelchair, because there are barriers for them getting to a book club meeting as well. So we're talking about just making the book club accessible. The big barriers when I first got involved were just the availability of books, of titles, and that has changed so much. It's again beyond my wildest dreams. There are so many ways, and I will talk about some of the sources as we go along, but getting a book title is just not nearly as limiting as it used to be. But it is an issue in terms of choosing books titles for an accessible book club where people come with all interests and abilities, to make sure the title is available in alternate format. Some other considerations which we'll talk about are place. Where are you going to meet if it's a face-to-face meeting book club, finding that place, or even if it's a virtual book club, and there are lots around the country jumping up, spreading now, a virtual one, making sure members have the technology and the ability to link to that meeting. time and frequency actually matter. The first book club in Ottawa that I was involved in still meets Tuesday mornings, first Tuesday of the month. But we were aware of a crew of people around us that actually wanted to meet outside of work time. So there's now the After Hours Book Club, which is run by the same group of people, but it's at 5:30 in the evening and is going very well. And that actually started during this COVID time. So it's virtual and it's after hours, and it's serving a need that was there. Finding members, using social media to advertise this. And I think there's an issue with the number of people in a book club. And face-to-face in Ottawa, we've had up to 15 or 20. And I think it's the same for the Zoom book club, that to have a good discussion, you do need to consider how many people you can accommodate. But at the same time, you don't want to turn people away. So Rachel asked me to say something about the value of book clubs. I'm afraid I thought, well, that's obvious, but it's not that obvious. And it's also, some of you may need to promote the idea of starting a book club. So that's something that you want to have in mind. And by the way, as Rachel said, I will provide the notes tomorrow or the next day. So you don't need to take a lot of notes now. But the most important thing for in terms of accessibility is actually inclusion and people with vision loss and many people with disabilities. Isolation is a huge problem, and this is something that brings people together. And it's the thing that the Ottawa group say most often. This is the one time I get together with a small group of people with and it's been a huge social value to me. And so that inclusion versus isolation is very important. Social connections, discover, and also a book club will venture into new areas that most people, something every month will be new to somebody. So that discovery aspect of the book club is important. And peer support. There are often, either before or after the official discussion of the book, there will always be some discussion about issues which are related to their disability or to their wanting where to find books. And that probably is equally true it's true of any book club. And this ability to support each other is really an important part of it. And just being involved in the community. Certainly the book clubs have brought people to the Canadian Council for the Blind and to CNIB because they heard about the book club and then wanted to be involved. Okay, so that's sort of the background to this. And as I say, the most important thing to me is remembering and being aware of what being accessible means. So we'll come back to quite a few of those points. If the book club is going to choose titles for each meeting, then where are you going to get the books that are in alternate format? And by alternate format, I'm talking about audio, which nowadays will either be a digital downloading the digital file directly, or it'll be receiving the book or getting it from the library on CDs, or putting the book on an SD card and sending it to the person who needs it. So there are a number of ways to get that digital version of the book. And we're talking about audio, which can be either human narrated or it can be text to speech. I have to say the book club I'm with are not keen yet on text to speech, but they also, most of them admit that they will take a book from Bookshare, which is a text-to-speech service, rather than not read the book. And that text-to-speech is getting better and better. So there are options with audio. I'm quite interested, as a really interesting example right now, the book that we're reading in Ottawa next week, or discussing, is Michael Crummey's The Innocents. And I picked up the audio version from audible.com because I'm not entitled to Sila. And I had already read the book, but I've listened to some of the audio. It is the strongest Newfoundland accent I've ever heard on an audio book. And it's not that easy to understand. Now, the members of Sila in the book club are getting the Sila copy, and it's actually text to speech. And it's the first time, I think, that we've taken a bestseller in text-to-speech. So I'm looking forward to next week's discussion, because I suspect there's going to be a lot of discussion about the quality of the narration, because some will have got it from Audible and some will have got it from Sila. But it's a good example of the kind of things that are available, and that text-to-speech is part of our lives now. The other side of alternate format is actually Braille, and there are people who, for especially leisure reading, really want to read Braille. And Sila's single-use Braille books are very popular with the serious Braille readers, and they share them around, which I think it's a great service, because older Braille books are often very battered and get beaten down by all the fingering that goes on. So Braille from Sila is a luxury that a lot of people really are enjoying. Or there can be e-Braille. So if you have a text of a book, it can be run through the Braille translators and be put, and then the reader can read it on a refreshable Braille keyboard or display. I'm not very experienced with it, but I've watched people using the refreshable Braille displays everywhere from restaurants to timetables to all sorts of things. And I should say at this point, actually, that there is a very good webinar that will go up on the Sila website shortly, which Lindsay Tyler did on devices and the equipment that people need. So I'm not going to go into that in any detail, but it's there on there are pages about it now, and then there's this webinar coming. The book clubs have a lot of different ways of choosing books, which I find quite interesting. In Ottawa, we actually have a retired librarian, Marsha Aronson, who some of you might know, who comes to the meeting once a year with a wonderful selection of books that we would enjoy, she's recommending, a huge wide range, and then the members vote on the titles as she goes through them, and we rank them basically and take the most popular for the monthly reading list. So that's one way of doing it. Individuals can promote books. The new book club is taking a Canada Reads approach, and 2 or 3 people will promote a book that they want everybody to read, and then the club will vote, and that'll be on the list for reading. So there's all kinds of ways to choose books, and I don't know, many of you are probably members of book clubs and have ways of doing this. It's the same for an accessible book club. There's not really any difference there. I think you do need to expect some quite spirited discussion about the pros and cons of different formats and about the quality of narration. The Sila books, which inevitably some of the narration is fantastic and some of it's not so good. And if it's not so good, we always hear about it from the members at the monthly discussion. And that's just life. And it's the same even with audible.com books. There's some good narration and some not so great. So, Rachel, have you had any questions yet in the chat about any of this?
Not yet. No, there aren't any questions yet.
That's fine. Because if questions about a very specific thing come up on Rachel's screen, she'll alert me and we might deal with it. Otherwise, I'm going to talk for 20 minutes or so, and then we're going to have lots of time for some discussion.
So just as you say that, of course, a question comes in.
I saw it. Actually, we don't deal with, Sila doesn't have large print. People can get large print from, the question was, do we deal with large print? The answer is basically no, but there's nothing to stop a member in a general book club or even in one for people with sight loss taking large print. And I quite often meet people who say, oh, I've been able to read large print until the last 6 months and now I need to make the transition. So large print is actually often a way into alternate formats. So I don't dismiss it at all. It just happens that Sila doesn't deal with large print. It's something the public libraries will do. Or I think I would expect that also people who might put a book on Kindle because they can manage the size of the print for themselves. So there's that option as well, which fits within accessibility regardless. Okay, thanks for that question. So what sort of structure do you need for the book club? we've found we need a coordinator. We need somebody who will make sure that if the books have to be ordered on CD from Sila, that is done. We've continued to do that in our book club, because I used to do it for the whole club, and the books were sent to the public library, and I went and fetched them and we distributed them at the meeting. None of that happens anymore, because the books are delivered directly to the patrons, but it's still, you need someone keeping an eye on the list, making sure people know what to order, ordering copies if you need to. And maybe this might be a volunteer, it might be a member of the club, it might be the sponsoring organization, someone from CNIB or CCB, but that coordination is important. Chairing the meetings is the other part of this. Typically, we've had one person doing it for a year or more and then switching. I think we may be moving towards rotating that chairing, because most of the chairing of the meeting is about leading the discussion, and especially if individuals recommend books and then people read that, why not have the person who recommended the book chairing that discussion? But that chairing and managing the discussion is necessary, and it could be it can be a bit different if you're doing it by Zoom, but either way, someone needs to be chairing the session, making sure it moves forward. We have quite a lot of, we've looked to have invited guests quite often, and we're lucky enough to have a number of authors in Ottawa. So Charlotte Gray is an honorary member of the book club because she loves coming to our book club to talk about her books. And one of the reasons she really likes coming is because she gets a very different perspective from the other kinds of other book clubs she gets invited to. The age range is quite significant. We have people from 4 or 5 different nationalities. We have, and also people with vision loss have a different view of a book in terms of the description very often. So Charlotte's one of our favorite author visitors, but we've had a number of others, and looking to provide some variety like that is actually, I think, makes a huge difference and makes the meetings much more interesting. Some people will need some guiding to get into the room, to be seated. When you have people with any kind of disability, there are some accommodations that need to be made. They're not significant, and they're often not significant, but they make a huge difference to the comfort level for that person. So making sure someone knows who they're sitting next to, and I'll talk a bit about running the meeting in a minute, but just getting people comfortable and into the room. And the co-host at a virtual meeting might want to might have that person look after the technical details. Another role is communications, and that's managing the membership list and knowing the members' coordinates. If you are running on a grant from a community foundation or something, you may need to record attendance just to prove that the club has a group of members and who you're benefiting. Meeting notices, Zoom links, teleconference numbers, all of those things need to be communicated. So communications is something probably best held by one person who's willing to do that. The other issue that isn't probably significant with book clubs, with most book clubs, is actually transportation. And I noticed in my notes it comes up several times. And we have a volunteer who's provided transportation for some of the members for quite a few years. And that makes a huge difference to the ability to get to the meeting if it's a physical meeting. So, everybody, if anyone with sight loss, is going to need a computer or a device for reading their books. And as I said, I'm not going to go into a lot of details of that because it's well covered in other aspects of Sila's services. But whether it's for audio or for Braille, that device is necessary. And when I look back, I happen to have been looking back over 100 years for the CNIB centenary. And when you look at some of the equipment that people dealt with or had for the first audiobooks to today, when it's in your pocket, on your iPhone, again, the world has changed dramatically, and it's always been for the better. One of the things but choice of device is very personal. and according to the disability and the need and their capability to obtain equipment. There are links to lots of pages on the website, on the Sila website, about devices, and I recommend you start there. Some public libraries, such as Ottawa, have equipment that can be borrowed, and usually on a 90-day renewable loan. So if somebody doesn't really know what they want and they want to try things, that's one option, is to go to the library and see if there's anything that they can borrow. In other cases, organizations have raised money to buy equipment for people. In Ontario, we have the ADP program, which periodically a person could spend their money on their reading device. So it's a question of getting advice, and this is where peer support comes in, and then help in choosing and learning how to use the equipment. So training in terms of equipment is actually the number one issue after obtaining the device. Quite a number of cities in Ottawa have, a number of cities in Canada have the benefit of Get Together with Technology, which is a CCB chapter program, and provides group support and one-on-one support to people for all their technological needs. But it's been particularly helpful for people with wanting reading devices. And I know Sila members have visited GTT meetings quite often to answer questions and promote equipment. And then there's the Sila help desk. So everybody, almost everyone, when they get started, needs some help. But I've also watched people be confronted with a new machine, a new Braille notebook or something one day, and say, I'm never going to do this. And I see them 2 days later, a week later, and it's as if they have had it for their whole lives, and they're communicating, and the world has changed. So it's that learning curve that we all go through at various times. People do need help choosing devices, whether or not to put their books on a smartphone or have a specific device, what computer they want, whether they're going to have a tablet or an iPhone. All those kinds of decisions are very personal, and I would recommend that you recommend people get advice, because it makes a lot of difference to have that support in the early stages. Then there's GTT's also spent a lot of time teaching people how to log into Zoom and to use Zoom. And interestingly, even before COVID, Zoom, I was already hearing about Zoom as being a very good accessible platform for people with vision loss to have conferences and meetings. And then it took off with COVID. So we all know much more about Zoom now than we did. But in many ways, people with vision loss were ahead of the curve on this one. Other things that somebody might need help with in order to get to the meeting is how to use a navigation app on their phone to get to a meeting. Not something the library thinks it should be doing or needs to do, but is out there as part of the support system that gets people to accessible book clubs. So there's lots written about managing meetings when you've got people with vision loss in that meeting. And on the notes that I'll send you tomorrow are a couple of links to very good websites and documents about accessible meetings. So again, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, but the location of the meeting is important. Is it an accessible meeting, an accessible building? Is there parking? Are there stairs? Are there accessible washrooms? What about elevators? And something that we don't think about a lot is noise. People with vision loss actually have quite a lot of difficulty with a room with people talking around them because they don't know where the voice is coming from. So noise makes a big difference. Lack of noise and lack of background noise makes a big difference to the comfort level for a person with vision loss. And actually, another thing I often notice, people with low vision want to be able to sit where they're not facing bright lights. So they will, in our board meetings, the people with low vision would all go to the side of the boardroom table where they had their backs to the windows. So things like that, small but make a massive difference to people's comfort level in terms of the location. Is there public transportation nearby? Can people get there on public transportation? Because these are not drivers that we're inviting to the meeting. The layout of the room, you need to keep it simple and not have obstructions in between the door and the table and things like that. So all of these things are covered in the managing accessible meetings, but they're just a few highlights to show you what sort of things you need to consider. If the meeting is virtual, it could be teleconference, it could be Zoom, it can be people like I think today a lot of people are with us with not using their video. Number of our book club members are happy to use Zoom, but they don't really want to be on video, so they turn the video off. Some of the ones who do have the video on, what we mostly see is the ceiling, because they obviously are not not able to see what their screen is showing. So you can encourage people actually to join by audio but not use video if it's of no benefit to them. So the chair's role is to make sure the discussion is that everybody gets heard. And with in any meeting where you have people with vision loss, the first thing that should happen is a roll call, so that everybody knows who's in the room and actually where they are at the table, who's around the table. If people don't know each other very well, you probably need to encourage them to say their name when they first speak. That's not an issue with a meeting, with something that's been going on for months or years. But the roll call is important so that everyone knows who's there. And if someone leaves the room, they should say that they're leaving, because that's another part of knowing what's going on in the room. There'll probably be several dogs under the table. They're usually quite happy with the book club. They'll be fine. The way we work it is we go around the table, each saying how we liked the book, and then we have general discussion. Book clubs can do whatever they like, but that works with this group because they can't see everybody in the room, and the chair can make sure that each person gets their moment to say how they found the book. Our book club actually likes to rate the books, so we give them a score out of 5. I've never come across any others who do that, but we've had some quite interesting discussions about that. So we had a discussion recently about having a more structured discussion with book club questions, but we pretty much rejected that as being too much like school. But I know there are quite a lot of book clubs, and there are lots of guides for book clubs reading particular books, but it's not something we wanted to do. A virtual meeting is a bit of a challenge, but we've got more used to it, and have to decide whether or not to use mute, whether to use the hand raising capability. But one thing I would suggest, everyone, if people are using VoiceOver or JAWS on their computer and they're in the book club, they need to mute themselves, because the VoiceOver from their computer will immediately make that person the speaker and interrupts the Zoom flow and the discussion. So people do need to use the Zoom a little bit carefully if they're using VoiceOver on their computer. So they need to know how to use mute. I've got food and drink on this list as well. This is all part of the meetings. We take it in turns to take treats to the meeting. But the issue about that is, if you have treats and you're serving coffees, you need to make sure that people know it's there and guide people to the food or serve them. So again, it's not just walk up to the table and grab your coffee, making sure that everybody gets their coffee or their drink. I guess a few special considerations about virtual meetings. Again, reviewing how to use mute and unmute, whether or not to use raising and lowering hands, or whether chat should be used like we're going to use it today. The book clubs are not like today's webinar. It's a lot less formal. We seem to get by with a small group, mostly maybe 10 people most of the time, with just interrupting when somebody wants to speak. But the chair does keep an eye on it and will moderate the discussion if necessary. There's actually quite a lot of people choose not to use the camera, and there is an accessibility webpage on zoom.us, which is probably the best place to go for advice on using Zoom for people with vision loss. I have a few, this I will give you, this you will get in the notes tomorrow, but the CCB, in our latest grant for the book club, we built in some money to update the accessible book club handbook. which is almost done and will be available by the end of the year. So Sila will certainly promote it, and it'll be on the CCB website. But that's a very detailed description of a book club, running book clubs for people with vision loss, but much of what's in there is relevant to any disability and of interest even to any book club. There's Sila, who has a web page on library programs, which include in the public library section. And CNIB Foundation has got information about workplaces, about workplace accessibility, which is also very relevant to the book clubs. So that's actually pretty much what I wanted to say or talk about. I think that bringing members into any book club that exists, bringing people with sight loss or disability into any book club that you have at your public libraries would be wonderful. And I really hope that we can help you do that. And then there will be people who want to start book clubs for people with vision loss. And there's lots of advice. I've talked about lots of issues that you deal with, but they're not significant issues. They're just things that make life much easier and make it much more comfortable for people with sight loss. So with that, I would love to answer questions and have some discussion. Rachel will moderate, and mostly we're going to do it from the chat. And I know Rachel's got some other questions if no one else has a question, but I can't believe there are no questions.
Thank you so much, Jane. I'm just going to interject here and just describe how you can get books from Sila for your book club.
Yes.
So every public library has, or public library system has, an interlibrary loan account. So you would log into that account and request the titles that you need. That is, if you only need one copy. If you need more than one copy of a book in our collection, then email members@silalibrary.ca, tell us how many copies you need, and then we can just issue that number of copies to you. We do ask you, though, to give us about 4 to 6 weeks just to really play safe and make sure that those books arrive to you in the mail. You can also download books using your interlibrary loan account. So if you wanted to put a book on a USB stick and put it in someone's Daisy player, you have that option as well. And you can borrow Braille from us. Any of our formats, any library can borrow them. So in a nutshell, that's how you would borrow a book from Sila for your patrons. When your patrons are done with it, just send them back in the mail to us as you would any normal Sila book. If it's a CD, then turn it over, put it back in the envelope, send it back to us. If it's Braille, so one-way Braille that Jane mentioned, you can keep it, the patron can keep it, or recycle it. It's up to you.
Or share it. I know.
Or share it, yes, with others, absolutely.
Everyone that they get, yes.
So we do have a question here. So Cassidy is wondering, so it says, thank you. And she's saying it's good to know you can borrow more than one copy. So this is actually another, at this point, just a reminder, just because we have such a big group, I'll read out your question, but I'll also give you the chance to unmute yourself if you have anything else to add. So I don't know, Cassidy, if there's anything you want to add. At this point, you can just unmute yourself, just move, if you're using a mouse, then you move it over. And the mute is on the far left bottom corner.
So with the book club that we have, and everybody is the only books I order from Sila now, and I'm not a library, is directly through you to about 4 people who are still using CDs. Is that common, or is that just we historically have a good connection to you?
No, very common, very common. I know we have some members here today who are from other CNIB offices and run a book club for their members. And so for many, many years, they contact us directly and ask for a set number of copies for their book club.
Or, well, ours get sent out directly. I don't handle them at all anymore.
Right. And then there's the alternative. We definitely prefer, if you have Sila members in your library, they request their own copies, but you can ask us as well to do it for you.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah, I think we've had we've had wonderful service since the day Sila existed, so we just carried on.
Thank you. So maybe just to get the discussion going and maybe opening it up, not just about accessible book clubs, but book clubs in general. Maybe some of you can share how your book clubs choose your books, and then we can lead into about finding the accessible formats for those books.
Yeah.
Any comments about that?
You want us to speak out loud?
Yeah, hi Adair, we can hear you.
Hey, how's it going?
Thank you.
So Adair Harper, I'm from Richmond Public Library over in British Columbia. And I actually find, so I asked the question earlier about the large print, as I'm working with a low vision support group out in the community. And they each have, like, there's a range of preferences there in terms of format, and it does include large print and as well as kind of like Libby online audio. So I actually find that the restricting factor in terms of titles isn't the Sila, the Daisy Disc options, which are, the membership team has been great at supplying those. I actually find it's more finding enough large print copies that we have in stock, as well as it being available on Libby without a gigantic wait list. So it's perhaps not quite what you're chatting about here. But so for me, what I do is I go and I ask folks kind of what type of book they might want to read next, and then I go and kind of wade through our collection trying to find basically the Venn diagram where that overlaps. So sometimes they're kind of funny titles that come out of that, purely based on what we can actually offer in terms of our collection access. So just thought I would put that one out there, because it's kind of the limitation isn't actually for folks who have minimal vision and are using discs. It's more so for the folks who are reading those other formats.
I totally agree with you, and it's there are two sighted members of the book club I've been talking about, myself and someone else, and the other person who's also the driver relies on the public library to get the title, and too often she's not able to get it. There's just too big a waiting list, or it isn't there. So there are many times when I jokingly say that the people who have access to Sila have a lot of benefits, and up until now, the people I know haven't really been using Libby and Overdrive, etc. But that's going to grow. But again, they come up against wait lists, and I absolutely do not mean to dismiss large print. I'm reading a lot of large print myself now, so it's actually an important issue that needs to be integrated into this discussion, because it suits a certain category of people. And they are up against a wait list problem, a physical wait list.
So we have quite a few questions and comments now. There's a question about volunteers. I'm just going to skip that while we keep on the topic of choosing our titles. So Allison is saying that group members are asked to bring in 2 suggestions, and then essentially they vote. Allison, I don't know if you wanted to add a bit more to that. Okay, so that's that's one way to do it, to have do a vote for everybody, which is great. Okay. So I'm going to move to the question. So Luke is asking about, other than the chair or the leader of the book club, you mentioned volunteers. How many volunteers do you use? So again, Luke, I'll just give you a chance if you wanted to just ask that question in person, or Jane can just answer it.
Is this the Luke I can see on the screen? Yes.
Yeah,
you're
on mute.
Unmute. Yeah. Anyway, we have 2 volunteers at the moment involved in the book club. Myself as pretty much the coordinator, and the person who does drive some of the members. We don't actually need other people. We meet in a very well organized room at the CCB. So guiding people there and doing things during the meeting, we don't really need volunteers for. But we're also only about 10 regular members. So but if you had a larger group, you probably would be great help to have 1 or 2 floating volunteers, which is why I say welcome people with sight, because the volunteers are very often people who can do the guiding and make sure the room is safe and so on. So every book club should have some of each, and some people who can see and some who can't. And it's a mutual support organization. So it's not a lot of volunteers. It's not like going out on a hike or something like that. But a couple of volunteers does make a big difference.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. It's something that I've considered. I work at the Calgary Public Library and at the Central Library downtown, and I've had issues in the past with some of our patrons getting into the brand new beautiful building that we have, and it would be nice to have some volunteer wayfinders to help people other than myself, right? Which is occasionally I get roped into doing that, but and it's lovely to do.
Believe it or not, I went on a field trip to the new Calgary Public Library with a library school professor friend, and my interest was to find my way around as if I were a blind person, and it's not an easy library. No,
you're not the first person to say that.
I know. Yeah. But anyway, so yes, for example, if you're going to have the meeting in the library building, someone at the door to guide people would make all the difference. I know Halifax, I've been to meetings where there's going to be a lot of blind people in the new Halifax Library, and there's always one or two volunteers at the door looking out for those people to take them to the meeting.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good.
So we have Connie from Okanagan Regional Library who talks about using a teleconference line, and so they have, I guess, a question of the week, basically. I don't know, Connie, did you want to tell us more about that?
Hi, sorry, trying to unmute.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
We have a question like, who's your favorite character in a book, or something along those lines, something different every week. And I was saying in my chat that the patrons are really finding it better because a lot of them don't have access to a computer, or they don't have other technology that they have access to, where we can do this book discussion group for them. And I guess I could have added a question on the bottom of that, which would have been any ideas about promoting, especially during COVID.
Do you mean promoting particularly to people with vision loss, or in general? Yeah. Well, you might. I would suggest you contact the local CNIB Foundation, because CNIB in particular has moved so many of its programs to virtual platforms, but a lot of it is teleconference. It's not necessarily Zoom. And so have a look on the CNIB website in the BC section and see what's there. Because that may give you some leads. I'm in the Maritimes, and there's actually they've an incredible number of programs that are running on teleconference, not just on Zoom, including a book club. So I know there's experience around CNIB now about running book clubs.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah, please do.
And I'll just let you know, kind of as an aside, we have lots of outreach tools on our outreach toolkit page for libraries. So you're welcome to browse that. It doesn't have an invitation to community organizations related to book clubs specifically, but there might be some wording there that you're welcome to use.
At CNIB in Toronto, Karen Brophy has, is it called Unbound, the book club that she's running?
I can't remember the title, but I know the one you mean.
We'll look it up, because there is someone who's responsible for Braille literacy across the country, who is promoting ways of bringing book readers together.
Great. So I guess the next description I'll go to is actually from Ottawa Public Library. And Sarah works for their homebound services, and just telling about the book clubs that she supports, or they support, in seniors' residences. So I don't know, Sarah, if you want to tell us more about that, or if you have any questions.
Oh, no mic. Okay.
No mic.
So my only comment about that would be, in the seniors' residence, I would I hope that they provide DAISY books for the people who need them, and then have other. I would suggest that's one of the locations where you might get a real mix of members, some with vision and some without, some with sight and some without. That's great.
Great. And Adair, you've shared a few more comments. So you have, you say as part of your book club, you have spouses with vision who participate in the club. So it's an event for together, which is nice. And also, you're the Senior Center Without Walls in Surrey has a weekly program with the library. And they read a short story out loud and have a discussion. That's a great idea. Yeah, and others who join through Zoom. And you make sure they have an access code, and that's a good way to protect the Zoom room so that no one else gets into it too. Adair, did you have anything else to add about? You have a very dynamic book club. Do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, I'm not from Surrey, but I was looking into more accessible formats for programming, and their call-in programming was a really interesting one, I thought. And I know that Ottawa is where I think that all began, so just wanted to share that. So basically the librarian drops in and just reads a story out loud, and then they discuss. So it's kind of a nice low barrier one where folks don't need to prep. They can just kind of have the discussion there. And then the comment about Zoom was just to say that, I wasn't aware until I kind of got into Zoom programming that folks can call in to regular Zoom meetings as well. So you can have it on Zoom and have that video discussion aspect, but then it can also have people calling in. So maybe everybody knows that, but I know it took me a little while to figure that out. And so just to say it's not an either or, although, the codes changing all the time can be a bit more of a barrier as well. So yeah.
Good. We have one member who's only joins by phone, and other than the problem with, she's still got a little bit of vision, so she can read the phone number okay, but that's the challenge really with Zoom if you do it by phone. But otherwise, she's the same as everybody else on the meeting. It works just fine.
I just want to add two things. First of all, there is a nice summary of the shortcut keys to using Zoom, which is what somebody would use if they're joining on their computer and has vision loss. Well, anyone could do it, it doesn't matter. So that's something to look for. The other thing too is so Zoom will come with a phone number, but you have to be careful. Sometimes the person might have to pay long distance charges. It kind of depends on where you live, but just an FYI about that. So.
No, that is true. And for the person who does has a countrywide long distance, so it's okay.
Right.
But it's not for everybody.
Yeah. We have about another 5 minutes or so before we wrap up. Does anyone have any other questions? I'm thinking particularly questions about starting an online book club and thinking of people with print disabilities in general and encouraging them to sign up. So just before they're giving a chance for people to ask questions, but one thing to consider, Jane really hit it on the nail on the head when she talked about contacting CNIB. Partnerships are huge, I find, in this community. So partnering with the print disability organizations in your community can make a big difference. But also connecting with other organizations like March of Dimes or sort of widespread or wider disability organizations can help as well, because then maybe you can talk to the members or like parents of children with disabilities and find out what they need. So it goes a little beyond book clubs, but still that's a practice. If you can incorporate it, it can really help.
And from our experience in Ottawa, most cities have a community foundation. This literacy and vision loss and disabilities go together very well, and the community foundations receive grants with requests for grants very favorably. So don't be afraid to go looking for funding as well to help people get equipment, which is really the big barrier now, or the most significant barrier for a lot of people.
That's a very good point, definitely. So just a comment here, Caitlin is saying that for certain Zoom account holders, you can make recurring scheduled Zoom sessions with the same meeting ID code. And that's a very good point. That way there's only one link. So that's very handy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not searching for the email that has the link for your club day, which is in an hour, that kind of thing. So it's really handy.
One of my coordinator jobs is to send the link again first thing in the morning of the meeting, so that everybody's got it on the top of their email.
And Sarah is saying she's looking forward to the new handbook, and so am I. I definitely read through the old one. It used to be on our site, but
I think the old one is probably still on the CCB website, but it's all about CNIB Library. It's very out of date in terms of where you get books from. So I assure you, it is within weeks of being set up. And this gives them added pressure because I've told them.
Does anyone have any other questions? Maybe any questions relating to promoting your club? Just thinking about the existing book clubs you have, how would you try and make people with print disabilities feel welcome within those existing clubs? Any questions like that before we wrap up? Okay. Oh, Caitlin, hi. So you work at CNIB, and you have I have a wonderful volunteer to get a virtual book club started in Belleville, Ontario. And then Jane, do you have any advice? I'll just
right. I thought I recognized the name. This is Caitlin from Kingston, I think. What I should do is put you in touch with the people in Ottawa who started the new online digital only book club. So Caitlin, if you want to drop me a note, I will connect you to the new club in Ottawa, and you can share some experiences, because it is going really well. And one of the things people like, which I think someone mentioned, spouses or partners are coming, sighted spouses and partners are coming and really enjoying being part of it, because often their spouse or partner goes off to some special event for people with vision loss and they're left out, but there's absolutely no reason for that with book clubs.
I'll just read, Luke had another comment saying it'd be nice to collaborate with other public libraries organizations to do some online book clubs together, which is a fantastic idea, actually. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, I'm not quite sure how that would get started, maybe through some online lists, library-related lists.
Yeah. And I think if you, again, look at the online offerings of CNIB at the moment, you'll see there are some book clubs, and if you wanted, you could probably contact a coordinator of one of those and get some ideas how to talk to that person. Yeah, good.
So we have another question about, can a book club operate on its own, or would a library staff member need to be reading along? So Jane, you're shaking your head. Okay.
I would say no. The most important thing is providing a room that people can get to, and that is free, actually, and there being some of the necessary support around it. There are lots and lots of clubs who meet at public libraries and don't involve library staff at all. Obviously, you need to make that initial request and get set up. But no, the book clubs should really try to be as independent as they can be.
And I'll just make one comment about that too, just to be very clear. Sila's collection is only for people with print disabilities. As library staff, you can access books from our collection, but it's for the person with the print disability. We've had questions about, actually specifically about book clubs, so a volunteer running, and they thought they could get access to Sila, but they didn't have a print disability. They'd have to get the book through their public library or buy it, whatever. So just to be clear about that.
As we said, we're on the waiting list for the book at the public library, while the Sila members get it directly.
Yeah. And so Amy is asking about so kids and disabilities. Do you have any? Do you know if any have been done for younger ages? Information by age in the book club handout. Oh, that's a good question.
It's a very good question. I'm not aware. The only thing I'm really aware of for children is the TD Summer Reading Club, and that is an incredibly important public library activity. I'm not aware of any book clubs for young children, but there's no reason why not, and especially for young adults. But again, those people are welcome at a book club for any young adult. So it's making any of your activities accessible and welcoming that really matters.
I'll just lead off on that. We had a very good presentation a few weeks ago from the executive director at Dyslexia Canada, and she gave some great tips about library services for people with dyslexia. One point she did make is really be cautious about asking people to read out loud in a book club. If you're a struggling reader, it could be embarrassing. So just that's a word of caution I would have. But definitely it's the same principle for just make sure you have accessible formats. People with dyslexia tend to want more e-text with the audio reinforcement. So if we have the book in our collection, definitely let the members know when they can access it that way.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
Very good. Well, we're about 2 minutes away from the end of the session. So thank you so much, Jane, for speaking to us. I certainly learned a lot, especially what you said about the meetings, which is something we don't talk about very often. So I'm glad you mentioned about running accessible meetings, especially for people with vision loss. So thank you. Just to wrap things up, I also wanted to say, I think we planned this topic on book clubs very specifically just because a book club can make people feel connected, and I think especially with people feeling isolated, everyone essentially, it really helps. So it's very timely that we offer this. Again, thank you. And I know you mentioned that too. Just quickly before we leave, so Sila does offer other webinars. So our next one is our orientation webinar, which is on December 8th at 2 p.m. We have a training page that you can go to, and it will be listed there. As Jane said, we will be making her slides available on our site, and we will email them to you as well, and we will provide the recording as well. And lastly, if you have any questions, you can always email members@silalibrary.ca, and we'll be happy to get back to you. And if you just want to share more tips or information about how you're running your book clubs, particularly with accessibility in mind, we'd love to hear them. So thank you very much for attending, and thank you, Jane. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Rachel. A very good, very nicely organized meeting. It was great. Thank you very much.
Good. All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.